With all of that context in Libya, do you support or agree with the U.S. policy?
And we're on the record, right?
I'm afraid we are.
I guess I can afford to be since
Yes.
I'm no longer in government. Look, the UN resolution that has brought us into military action in Libya focuses very much on a new principle in international law called the responsibility to protect. The resolution is infused with this idea that the international community has a responsibility when peoples are at risk because of the actions either of their own government or of other players within society. The international community has a responsibility to protect those people. The idea of this principle, of course, derives from the genocides that we have very tragically seen even in our own lifetime. For example, in Rwanda, in the Great Lakes region of Africa, in which most of the international community sat aside while perhaps 1 million people were slaughtered in a very concerted way. So the principle is a very interesting advance in international humanitarian law. The problem is that, in my view, that the principle has gotten ahead of thinking about what you do to see that principle through to fruition. And so we have entered now into a situation where we are presumably trying to protect those Libyans who are at risk from their governments, but we don't really know what that means. The president last night tried very artfully to create a kind of model in which, on the one hand, he said there are things that we will do unilaterally to protect American interests, and there are things that we will do multilaterally when other kinds of interests are at play. And the president tried to portray this as one of those cases where we are comfortable in the multilateral sphere in carrying this out. But I think there are still a lot of unanswered questions about what it means to implement the responsibility to protect. If the rebels, for example, take over a city and use the population in that city as human shields against Gaddafi's forces, then where will we aim our bombs at that point? The rebels become as implicated in a possible harm to civilians as the regime is. Second, why would we apply this only to Libya when we're now seeing civilians killed wantonly in Syria? Are we going to carry this from state to state to state without some metrics or measurements by which we define this principle? So I'm challenged by our decision. I don't want to, now that our armed forces are in play, all of us will give whatever support we can. We have extraordinary military that's been working overtime for 10 years now, carrying out our national policies. And I would want nothing that I say tonight to indicate any lack of support for that kind of heroism and dedication. But I think our policymakers need to explain to us a little bit better where the lines are that we're going to be following here, both with respect to Libya and what the implications are for other places in the Middle East or elsewhere where that responsibility to protect may come into play.